Tim Naki is the wildly hilarious foul-mouthed Kiwi from the land of hobbits who's seen a meteoric rise to success on social media in just the past 4 months, all based on one simple idea.
We're going to the Blackjack table, bidding 10 cents for every follower. Let's get after it.
What started as a $1,500 bet for his 15,000 followers on Instagram quickly exploded into a cult-like following of 1.3 million who tuned in daily to see the Tin Tin Table God throw down 6 figures worth of digital green while verbally berating whatever unlucky individual happened to be dealing to him that day.
They talk about the Great Recession, he could be the face of it with the hairline this man is running.
Obviously, this massive rise in popularity brought along the usuals, such as brand deals, partnerships, and podcast interviews, but it also had everyone wondering when this would all come to an end. In the beginning, Tim didn't even have a goal, but eventually he set the benchmark of hoping to make $1 million in profit, and on day 83 of the challenge, he actually achieved this goal.
The millie has been reached! 83 days!
Which kind of feels like a good time to maybe hop in here and remind everyone that gambling is not an investment strategy. More recently, when being interviewed, Tim did state that he had changed his ultimate goal from $1 million in profit to day 100 of the challenge, and if he wasn't able to reach day 100 of the challenge, he would not go below $500,000 in profit.
He would love to get to day 100.
And ladies and gentlemen, it's with a heavy heart that I report that as of only a few weeks ago, Tim had a tragic loss on the felt of a $195,600 punt, bringing him down to his stopping point of $500,000 in profit and ultimately ending the initial series.
The insufficient funds is a kick in the d***.
And yes, you did in fact hear that number right. One hand of blackjack worth $195,600. That man was playing one hand of blackjack worth an Aston Martin. One hand of blackjack worth 2 average 4-year degrees in the United States. One hand of blackjack worth 15,648,000 pieces of Chiclets gum. Now how's that for something to chew on? Regardless of what's next for the adventures of Tim Naki, one thing is for certain. He has become the poster child for a formula that every single creator without an ounce of creativity is going to latch onto for years to come. And oh my god, the floodgates have already opened.
G'day punters, it's day 55 of betting 5 cents on the best bet of the day for every Instagram follower I have.
Today is day 7 of betting 1 cent for every.
It's day 145.
Day 121 of betting 50 cents for every Instagram.
Now, in all fairness, Tim isn't even remotely close to the first person to do something for every X amount of followers they have. There have been YouTubers doing giveaways whenever they hit a major milestone like a millionth follower, Twitch streamers doing subathons where they stay live longer hours depending on how many subs they have, and I've even seen other people on Instagram prior to Tim follow an incredibly similar formula. Even Tim credits someone else with the idea during an interview.
Where did this crazy idea start?
This American bloke, he was walking 1 inch for every follower every day. It was a lot more wholesome than what I'm doing and beneficial to his life for sure.
But what Tim has done is taken this to the extreme by concocting every social media algorithm's wet dream. And he has by far been the most successful utilizing a formula of this type, which is exactly why I want to talk about Tim, and more specifically, the controversy that surrounds him. Now, the first part of this formula that makes Tim so successful is what he's doing is incredibly engaging. By doing something that is tied directly to your audience's influence, people, including myself, want to come back daily to see if Tim is going to win or lose his money that I'm partially responsible for him betting. It makes me and others feel like we're all in on the action without having to hold any of the traditional risks associated with gambling.
Look what they did to my hand, man.
This concept alone is a great way to increase your following, and is now being utilized by people that touch on every single niche on social media. You have fitness influencers like Patrick Rowe, who promises to deadlift 1 gram for every follower on her account. Or Chewy Thompson, who I'm pretty sure is Tim's inspiration, hit 1 million followers by walking 1 inch for every follower he had. People in the education sphere, like the UBC Academic Weapons, who study 1 second for every follower. Snowbird the Mooney promises to fly 5 feet in his plane for every follower. Doop will eat 1 strand of pasta per follower. And even some that don't really make a lot of sense. While all of these creators have bid onto the idea of utilizing a strategy focused on high engagement rates of their follower base, the majority of them are missing that next critical piece of the miracle Naki goo, which is easily repeatable. Let's take a look at some of the creators I just mentioned. The last video Doop has up for this challenge is day 17, where he has to eat 12,400 strands of pasta. That's 4 full plates of pasta! Even Matt Stoney would be starting to sweat by now. Day 17 was the last video he posted on this challenge over a month ago, and now he's up to 17.9k followers, which means that now it would probably be 5 to 6 full plates. The thing is, he completely abandoned it for a different type of challenge where the comments just tell him what type of sandwich to make. And it's going... well, it's going. The problem for Doop is there's a limit to how much food the human body can take, and if you're struggling at numbers like 12k, hitting any significant milestone like 50 or 100k is going to be impossible, making a challenge like this non-repeatable. Then you have Chewy Thompson. Chewy promised to walk 1 inch per follower every single day, and at first this did seem like something that was doable, until I remembered something I learned in school. Math. So I dusted off the old 3 brain cells that I have remaining and came to the conclusion that I'm not so sure he's following through. Let's just start with the math real quick. And I already know some of you are like, math? Yeah, math. There's actually going to be a decent amount in this video because the entire latter half of it is focused on gambling. So buckle up, Buttercup. School may be over, but class is in session, and Professor Yanni's about to learn you that good education. Over the past 7 videos of Chewy's walking challenge, he's had between 920,000 followers on day 101 and 1 million followers on day 120. It's important to note that Chewy doesn't post daily, but he does keep his daily count going, implying that even on the days he doesn't post, he's still doing his walking. This tracks for day 112 being on April 24th and day 110 for being on April 22nd, even if there wasn't a day 111 post on April 23rd. But it starts to not make a lot of sense with day 108 being 5 days before that on April 17th. In fact, the dates in the day's walk make even less sense the further you go back, so I'm already kind of skeptical. But let's just focus on days 101 on March 27th through day 120 on April 30th, where Chewy has implied that he has continued this challenge while missing only a few weeks and walking somewhere around an average of 950,000 inches every time he does walk. There are 63,360 inches to a mile. At 950,000 inches a day, that means that every other day for a month straight, he was walking just under 15 miles. Or for those that don't speak 9 mil per freedom chicken, 24 kilometers. But Yonside, I've walked 15 miles in a day before. So have I. That's not the part that's raising a red flag for me. As I said earlier, a lot of his days and dates don't really make a lot of sense. But as he gets closer to the million mark, a lot of them actually start to align. So much so that it is implied that the last 13 days of his journey, he is walking these 15 or 16 miles every single day. Now, I do want to point out that this isn't impossible, but there are some things that make it pretty improbable. For starters, the time it would take. The average person can comfortably walk a mile in about 20 minutes. Now, assuming Chewy didn't stop to use the bathroom, eat, stretch, take breaks, or do anything else, and kept a consistent pace, this would still take him 5 hours every single day. And at least every day that he posted about it, he did it in loafers and a suit while filming himself. In addition, a lot of people who use this content formula post a time-lapse of them completing the challenge in its entirety, whereas Chewy takes more of an entertaining and cinematic approach. And while there isn't anything wrong with that, he hasn't done anything to back up or prove that he's walked. He hasn't posted the routes that he's walked, his schedules on the days he doesn't post, or even any data from his Apple Watch that's clearly visible in a lot of his videos, which would be as simple as a screenshot from his iPhone. And look, I'm really not trying to pick on Chewy here. He also says that he's down 50 pounds, which is amazing. And it also seems like he's really encouraging people to engage in healthy activities and even start on some of their own weight loss journeys. So even if there is some deception involved, at least it's for a good cause. Plus, I could be wrong and he might just be the Forrest Gump of the gram. The point I'm trying to make digging into Doop and Chewy here is that so many other versions of this formula have an upper limit because there's only so many hours in the day and limitations to the human body. Because Tim only ever played one hand, and it was online from his computer at home so he could just easily screen record it, it probably never took him more than 20 minutes a day. As long as he had the money and the casino was willing to accept his wager, theoretically there was no upper limit. While Tim checks the boxes for engagement and repeatability, another big aspect that helps with Tim's popularity is the fact that Tim is an incredibly charismatic guy. Tim approached all of his videos with a positive attitude and high energy, even when he was losing or sick, and he usually came equipped with an arsenal of hilarious insults to fire off towards the dealers that would make you think he was working on material for a stand-up routine rather than just playing blackjack.
This guy might be a couple of vowels short the full alphabet, but that doesn't matter. He gives a strong impression that he hangs out around laundromats, pinching women's undergarments.
Prior to the blackjack run, Tim wasn't some big-name streamer or celebrity. As I had mentioned, he started with only 15,000 followers, so by all accounts, he was just some random dude who decided to stream some degeneracy and got lucky while finding a way to get us all involved, which makes him feel kinda like one of the guys and someone you want to root for. There are a couple of other creators who are incredibly well liked, but they do start to deviate from other parts of the formula. Simon's Graham is a little dude who claps for every follower he gets. Now, he does change the formula a little bit and only claps for the amount of new followers he gains. It's not exponential in growth, but it does allow him to not really have an upper limit, making it much more repeatable unless he out of nowhere gained 1 million followers in one day. He's just a fun little dude who's clapping and having a good time. His comment sections are always positive, and he always has a smile on his face, so it's still engaging, repeatable, and he's got a great personality. So how could you possibly hate on that? Then you've got Marissa Samatova, who draws one movie character for every new follower onto a big canvas she's working on. She seems to be a lot like Simon's in the way that it's not exponential, and in fact she really only updates with one new movie character every time, which still keeps it easily repeatable and not having an upper limit. On top of that, it's engaging because she takes recommendations for which characters to draw from the comments, and while she might not talk much, it is showcasing a really cool skill and art form, and keeps people invested by wondering which character's coming next. And while all of these aspects do add up to a recipe for success for some of these creators, we still haven't talked about the elephant in the room. The reason Tim's challenge was meant to succeed is a culmination of everything I mentioned before, but it also has to do with ties to an industry that in the United States alone is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and nowadays is more accessible than it's ever been. Gambling. Now, I'm not going to sit here and preach to you guys about gambling, and I'm going to try my best to not be an armchair psychologist, but the truth of the matter is study after study after study have shown that gambling can be highly addictive. Gambling activates your brain's reward system, it increases dopamine production, and overall it can affect your brain a lot like drugs or alcohol do. And while I am having a problem finding any peer-reviewed paper talking about the psychological effects of watching other people gamble, it's probably because the phenomenon of mass watching other people gamble is so new. Regardless, I'd be willing to bet almost anything that watching other people gamble has similar effects on your brain as if you were to just gamble yourself. One quick look at Tim's comment section can basically verify that for me. It's possible to be addicted to someone else's gambling. At this point, my mood for the day is set by the outcome of this vid. Is it wrong to be addicted to watching someone play blackjack? Correct. And while I do understand that the majority of these comments were made as jokes, when you're averaging a couple 100,000 likes per post, it's very clear that I wasn't the only one who was tuning in to get my daily dose of degeneracy. It's not a secret that every company that's ever had a product that's labeled for adults has tried to get kids invested into it at a young age. And that's for good reason. When your brain isn't fully developed, it's much easier to form habits and addictions. That's why you see nicotine marketed as blue raspberry and alcohol labeled as whipped cream. It was only a matter of time until somebody found a way to turn what is essentially a rigged video game that you can boot up on your PC at home into a real-life way to lose money. I would even argue that Counter-Strike has already been doing it for years. And while I don't think that Tim is the evil mastermind behind some conspiratorial psyop plot by the gambling industrial complex, myself and many others have been wondering how much, if any, of Tim's run was real. So let's start from the top with the basics, like who's Tim? According to his website, Tim Naki, or if we're going to go by his real name, Tim Myers, is a small-town New Zealander who grew up in a horse training family. He founded his own farrier business, had an affinity for sports, and enjoyed gambling with his friends. He even says in an interview that he's been gambling his entire life due to growing up in the horse racing industry. Him and his friends decided to start streaming their gambling sessions, and eventually, once they got big enough, were approached by a couple of groups to stream on their platforms. What's interesting is prior to Tim's Blackjack run, he almost exclusively streamed himself playing slots or watching horse races, with the very occasional roulette or blackjack thrown in there. Now this is important to note, because even while Tim was on his blackjack run, he never live streamed his big blackjack hands, which is understandably one of the biggest criticisms from those who think the entire ordeal was faked. If you were already a gambling streamer, why would you not be streaming the one thing that is currently blowing you up, and theoretically would bring in thousands of extra viewers and dollars from subs, ad revenue, and commercial time? That's because a lot of people think that Tim was playing more than one hand. The idea here is Tim would play multiple hands and pick whichever one best fit the direction in the narrative that he wanted the run to head. And from an entertainment standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. If you lose too many in a row, the run is over. If you win too many in a row, the run is fake. You want your hand to be exciting and your reaction to be good. If I double down here and win, I can stand to lose the next couple. It all makes for a good story. If you followed Tim as all of this was going down, or even if you go back and watch his videos now, you'll notice that Tim wins a lot. And you don't need to have gambled before to know that how much he's winning seems too good to be true. So I went looking online to see if anybody had tracked Tim's games, and after about 5 minutes of looking, realized that I was probably the only psycho who cared enough. So you know what they say, if you want something done right, spend hours of your life watching a middle-aged man gamble your life savings every few seconds while tracking his win-loss ratio. Or Something like that. So that's exactly what I did. Starting with day 1, I tracked Tim's wins, losses, how much the bet was worth, and any additional notes I had along the way. And I watched every single video in the series until the final on day 90. The first thing that struck me as odd when recording Tim's streak was his lack of pushes. Now, for anyone that doesn't gamble, a push is when you and the dealer both have the same number in blackjack. So you don't win any money, but you don't lose your bet. In blackjack, there's an 8.48% chance of pushing with the dealer. If you multiply Tim's 90 hands by 0.084, we come to the conclusion that in a perfect world, Tim should have pushed 7 hands, but he actually only pushes 3 times. Now to me, this does slightly support the idea that this run, or at least this portion of the run, was scripted. Pushing 3 times when you should have pushed 7 isn't that out of the norm. But when you're scripting or storyboarding something that needs to seem believable, you want every moment to matter. A win is exciting and it has people rooting for you. A loss is devastating and it has people coming back the next day to see if you can make that money back. But a push is, well, it's a push. It's a boring yet unavoidable part of the game. So how do you make something that's boring and unavoidable exciting? How about 3 of them in a row?
It's a f***ing push, 57 days. Oh, it's a push. You wouldn't f***ing read about it. It's a no way. No f***ing way.
That's right. The only 3 pushes Tim gets the entire series are back to back to back. And for all of the math heads at home, the odds of getting 3 pushes in a row is 1 in 1,687. And this is where my math skills start to fall off, so feel free to correct me in the comments section. But when you take into account the 3 days of pushing in a row, and then also factor in the odds of never pushing for the other 87 days worth of hands, I calculated the odds out to be pretty low. The lack of and strange placement of pushes was just the first thing to catch my eye. After tallying everything up, the next thing that caught my attention was Tim's win percentage. Tim played 90 days. However, 3 of those days, as previously mentioned, were pushes. So I'm going to take them out of my data set because theoretically a push is neither a win or a loss, even if some people would consider a push a win. Secondly, there are 2 different times during Tim's run where he goes to play Blackjack live in Vegas. Once from day 29 through day 32, and a second time from day 74 to day 75. The first time Tim goes to Vegas, he flat bets 10K 1 hand per day, and that's it. The second time he goes, it gets a little bit messier. Because of the table limits and how much he's trying to bet for day 74, Tim has to play 6 separate live hands, and on day 75, Tim plays 3 live hands and 1 hand online. I'm going to simplify this a little bit by not counting any of the live bets and only counting the online bet on day 75. And I already know some of you are going, "You're changing the statistics to fit your narrative." First of all, I mostly want to focus on the online bets Tim made because those are the points of controversy. Second of all, would you shut up and give me a minute? I'm getting there. I don't want to just ignore Tim's live hands. And in fact, I'm going to put them into their own category because statistically, I think they're incredibly important to the larger picture. Tim plays a total of 13 live hands of blackjack across 6 days and wins 5 of the hands. This makes his in-person win percentage 38.46%. Now the odds of you winning a blackjack hand, assuming you aren't playing like you need to permanently wear a helmet for public safety, is 42.22%. This means that when Tim was playing at an actual casino, he was winning and losing just about as much as he should. But whenever Tim was playing online, it was a much different story. Out of the 82 hands played online, not counting the pushes, Tim won a total of 51 times, making his win percentage 62.19%, almost a full 20% above the average over 82 hands. Once again, this is where my math starts to fall off, but I'd be willing to venture a guess that sustaining those odds over 82 hands is pretty low. Furthermore, something very interesting happens on day 43. Tim comes off of a 6-day break from his blackjack series and proceeds to lose a monster $30,000 hand, his biggest hand so far. For day 44, he posts his video saying that he's going to change his betting strategy to only 2 cents per follower, as apparently voted on by his following. While Tim did start off the series incredibly lucky, right before he changes his bet to only 2 cents per follower, he has his worst string of luck in the series, losing 6 out of 7 games in a row and going from $226,000 in profit to $120,000 in profit. The timing of this is very interesting to me, and it's where the idea that all of this is scripted kind of starts to fall apart. With starting to take days off in between videos and now changing the size of his bets, it's clear that Tim was starting to get worried, and for good reason. He just lost $100,000 in the last week worth of videos. Tim was now venturing into bet sizes where just 3 or 4 bad hands could end the streak and completely wipe out any of the profits that he's made along the way. I mean, let's be honest, if you or I were up $100,000, we wouldn't want to lose it all for some Instagram gag either. We would be trying to find a way that we could walk away while making sure we secure at least some of that profit. For the next 6 days, Tim continues to bet 2 cents a day, with one day randomly betting 5 cents a day because he said he felt like it. And that is until day 50. Out of nowhere, with zero explanation, Tim goes back to betting 10 cents per day. In fact, the only way he really addresses it is with a comment saying we will be sticking with 10 cents per follower until the next losing hand. With a following at the time of 320,000, that means day 50's bet was $32,000, Tim's largest bet to date. But it gets even crazier when he gets dealt a pair of 8s versus a dealer's 6. The correct move in Blackjack when you have a pair of 8s versus a dealer's 6 is to split them and play 2 hands, because it gives you better odds of winning. Don't ask me why, just understand that people who are much smarter than me figured this out a long time ago. When you split your cards, you have to double your bet, because now you're playing 2 hands. This meant that Tim's total bet for this one game was up to $64,000. And this is where the whole thing starts to feel really weird to me, because just weeks, if not days before, Tim was so concerned with the size of his bet that he was willing to take days off in between videos, and even change the size of his bet per follower. Now out of the blue, with no justification, he's back to betting 10 cents per follower, and betting enough on a singular play that if he were to have lost both hands of the split, he theoretically would have only had enough money for one more day of the challenge, or to probably just quit and walk away with some sort of profit. But just like a Disney movie written by AI, this Cinderella story of addiction does have a happy ending, because Tim wins both hands of his split. And then he proceeds to win the next 4 days in a row.
Job done here! They don't know! Yes! Yes! Sex! Teeny! Yes! 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 10 and the job is done! That'll do!
Tim finally faces another loss on the 55th day, and having previously stated that he'd be sticking with 10 cents per follower until his next loss, a lot of people assumed that day 56 would bring about a 2 cents per follower bet. But instead, Tim makes this announcement.
It's day 56, going to Blackjack and betting 10 cents for every Instagram follower. Now, I know I said after we lost a hand I would drop the bet back down, but with day 56, we have hit the 400,000 follower milestone, so we're going to keep it the same, at least one more day, $40,000 bet coming right up.
So because he hits the milestone of 400,000 followers, he decided to keep the bet at 10 cents per follower. But that's the last we ever hear about the bet changing. No more video updates and no more comments. This whole deciding to change the bet and then going back on it seems a little bit weird to me, especially because 400,000 seems like such an arbitrary milestone when Tim was at 300,000 only 12 days before and would be at 500,000 only 4 days later. Now I will admit, this could be explained by Tim's most recent string of wins, which put him up more than $250,000 in profit, thus giving him more wiggle room to play with and not to be as nervous. From here on out though, Tim proceeds to go on what has got to be one of the greatest blackjack runs of all time. From day 50, where he goes back up to his 10-cent bets, all the way to day 83, where he reaches his goal of hitting $1 million in profit, Tim wins 22 games, loses 8, and pushes 3, making his win percentage 66.7%. And if you adhere to the old adage of a push is a win, then Tim's win percentage is actually 75.75%. On top of that, during this 33-day streak, Tim never has back-to-back losses, but he does get dealt a blackjack 3 separate times, with 2 of those times being back-to-back. And the odds of that happening are already a minuscule 0.2%. It's insane odds like these and wins at just the right time that are littered throughout Tim's saga and have so many people questioning its legitimacy, and if Tim and or one of his partners was just cherry-picking hands for one of the most impressive marketing campaigns to date. Of course, then people have the question of how could Tim afford to play multiple hands and choose which one he wanted? And the easy answer is, it wasn't his money. After all, it's not like he'd be the first person gambling sites had given money to bet with on their socials or on lives in hopes of converting new players. It was the entire Twitch and Kick meta for almost 6 months straight before Twitch banned it. And even then, it's still a massive category on Kick. Some streamers and YouTubers even have deals where they get a certain amount of money to blow with no risk, and if they win anything, they just get a small percentage, or they get a portion from new signups and affiliates who use their links.
When I gamble, and if it goes down and goes to nothing, it goes down and goes to nothing, and I keep nothing. But if I win and I get something, or I stay flat, I keep those amounts. Some of these deals are some bull, like, oh dude, I'm just gonna go, and it's gonna refill and but if I win, I only keep a certain portion of it.
When trying to find some more background info on Tim, I found a thread in the New Zealand subreddit talking about him and how he's part of a group called Degeneration Nation. Sure enough, when you visit their website, Tim's smiling face and his signature flappy hat is one of the 5 figureheads on the front page, conveniently located right below their sponsor, Spinbit. Spinbit and Spinbet are both online casinos that are owned by the same company and have conveniently been dubbed New Zealand's biggest betting platform. And as far as I can tell, has been Tim's platform of choice for as long as he's had his live streams up on YouTube since over a year ago. Now obviously I have no idea how deep of a contract he has with SpinBet, but the connection is enough to bring a few more things into question, such as how much are you getting paid and what's the structure of that contract, because I somehow doubt you're doing promotion for free. It also makes me question the timing of the wins and the losses right before Tim goes to Vegas for the second time. For a while, Tim was saying that he was on track to hit the $1 million in profit on the felt while he was in Vegas, but conveniently lost 2 out of the 3 hands right before going, making that impossible. And while losing at gambling shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, you do have to remember that Tim at this point was winning or pushing 3 out of every 4 hands he was playing, so to lose 2 so close to each other during the most crucial moment seems almost a little too convenient. On top of that, if you're a gambling platform who sponsored somebody, you now have a vested interest in seeing that person hit their biggest milestone that everybody's been waiting for, using your platform. You would not want it to happen at a real casino that has no ties to your business and has the same consumer base that you're currently trying to attract. This is why I initially thought it was weird when I saw that the day after Vegas, Tim announced he was partnering with Raised Online Casino. At the moment, it seemed to put the idea that Tim had previously been heavily partnered to rest. After all, he was on an insane win streak, and he still haven't hit the $1 million yet, so if he was locked into a partnership or a contract, there is no way they would have let him go. But that's when I saw the most interesting thing yet. On the second day of tracking Tim's wins and losses, I was rewatching his promotional video for the Blackjack syndicate he was hosting, partnered with Raised Casino, when I noticed a comment at the bottom of my screen claiming that Raised and SpinBet were actually owned by the same company. Because I'm in the US, I don't have access to SpinBet or SpinBit Casino, but I was able to stumble upon a database of online bookmarkers which just so happened to give me some basic information about SpinBet, such as the owner, Pretense Flip NV, a company licensed out of Curacao, which is a small island nation off of Venezuela. Now, Raised was actually easier. I was able to just search for their about page on their site, and while they still had their geo-block come up, it didn't block the full page, and I got all the information I needed from the bottom corner. Owned and operated by Pretense Flip NV. Now that I knew that both sites were owned and operated by Pretense Flip NV, I tried to find out more about the company, other sites that they own, more affiliated players, but the problem was, I couldn't find anything. And I mean anything. There's no website, there's no known employees, the entire company is a complete ghost. But this does mean that from the beginning, Tim has never switched gambling platforms. Heck, he's never even taken a different gambling sponsor. He's been working with the exact same company the entire time, even if he's made it seem like he wasn't. And just for a little extra fun, what do you think Tim's win percentage was during the Blackjack syndicate? Well, after 5 games, he ended up winning 3, lost 1, and pushed another. That makes his win percentage 60%. Or if you're counting a push as a win, 80%. Or as I like to call it, weirdly close to the exact same percentages he was pulling during the 33-game streak. The day after hitting the $1 million in profit mark, things went south for Tim quickly. He ended up losing 5 out of the next 7 games, including a massive Hail Mary loss, which ultimately brought him down to his $500,000 in profit stop mark and ending the series. Tim took a short break saying he'd be back with a new challenge, and he held true to his word. Currently, he's playing Blackjack at 1 cent for every follower, with some sort of punishment if he doesn't make profit for the week, such as having to eat a ghost pepper, while also giving out some prizes to the viewers. It's very clear from his current likes and comments count that dropping the bet by a factor of 10 and ending the original series has really lost a lot of backing and interest for Tim. It's not to say that daily $13,000 bets aren't insane, because they still are. The problem is Tim's core audience got too used to $50, $80, even $120,000 bets, which makes these $13,000 bets seem kind of insignificant. And considering the majority of Tim's audience started following him on day 60 or later, once you go back to the same size bets you were making on day 17 of the initial challenge, a lot of the people who were later to your run are not going to be interested. Tim seems to have broken the second rule to his own formula, which is now he's created his own upper limit. I mean, theoretically, we could get back to the $130,000 bets that we all love to tune in daily to, but that would require Tim to get 13 million followers, and that's not very realistic. So what does this all mean? Well, it means one of 3 things. And I know, I'm sorry, alright? That's not the conclusion or the definitive answer that you were looking for. But the truth of the matter is, without seeing contracts or recordings, or even being in the room with Tim at the time, we're probably never going to get a real answer. But I will tell you which one of the options that I think is most likely, and the option that almost all of the math supports. Number 1. This was one of the greatest marketing stunts of all time and needs to be studied for generations to come. From day 1, everything was planned to a T. The hot streak right off the beginning was enough to get people invested, while also giving Tim padding for future losses. Taking days off and changing bet sizes was no more than dramatized conflict that was used to allow for time and natural growth of his follower base. And while it wasn't all of his own money, he was still getting heavily paid out for his role in promotional activities, with the end goal just to be to promote a gambling site. Number 2. I'm completely wrong, and everything that I've brought up is pure coincidence, and we all did just witness the greatest gambling run of all time. Regardless of all the wild statistics and ties to various organizations that I've brought up, it is all still circumstantial. I can use all the math I want until my college calc teacher creams on his calculator, but this is gambling. One of the few times on this planet where luck sometimes does take precedent. If Tim played 10,000 hands, I'd be much more sure of the math. But the problem is Tim only played 90. So while a lot of these odds are incredibly improbable, they're not impossible. And number 3, what I can't prove but what I do think happened was that it was both. I do think that Tim started this challenge using all of his own money, and I think it was probably just blind luck at first. If you look at days 1 through 49, Tim's win percentage was 58%. And while yes, this is a decent amount above the average, this still means that Tim was barely winning more than half of his hands. I do also think that Tim has always had some sort of partnership with SpinBet. He's been a member of Degeneration Nation, which has direct ties to SpinBet for over a year now. However, prior to the Blackjack run, Tim was not some big name streamer or YouTuber. If you go to his YouTube page, most of his previous streams sit at around a couple hundred to maybe a couple thousand views. And trust me, as a smaller content creator, a lot of our contracts are not that in-depth or that lucrative. I mean, I don't even have a sponsor for this video. As someone who has some knowledge into the creator side of things, the idea that a tiny gambling streamer from a non-major market was picked out of an ocean of creators to be the face of the most viral marketing campaign of 2024 seems more improbable to me than almost any statistic I've brought up today. But I do think that somewhere in the middle of the challenge is when things changed. As I mentioned before, it seems like Tim started to get scared. He went on a bad string of losses, so he started to bet less frequently and with less money. Then on day 50, out of nowhere, he was back to betting 10 cents per follower and posting daily, and went on an insane win streak where he had a 75% chance of winning or at least not losing his money. I think that somewhere in this time frame, Tim was able to leverage his newfound social media fame to get an improved contract. Now obviously I have no idea what type of contract this was. It could be a contract like XQC talked about where Tim incurs no losses but only gains a small portion of his winnings. It could have also been a monthly allowance that allowed Tim to bet multiple hands and choose which one he wanted. It could have also stated that he has a guarantee he'll hit the $1 million in profit on their platform, but afterwards it would just be over. This would at least answer the questions of why did Tim go on such a bad run right after hitting the $1 million in profit, and also why did he hide his balance during the run but didn't during the Blackjack Syndicate and doesn't now. It might just be because his contract ran out after hitting the $1 million in profit, so now he's back to his old ways of one real hand per day with his own money. Even though the initial saga of Tim is over, it's clear that he was the frontrunner for the most lucrative social media formula that anyone has ever seen. But I want to know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Was it pure luck? Was it pure marketing? Was it a mix of both? Or was there something that I completely missed? Before you go, I do want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe, maybe even share with a couple of friends. As a smaller creator who doesn't even have sponsors yet, it really helps me out and I really appreciate it. Next, I understand that some of the topics and materials that I talked about today can be very heavy subjects for some people. And while I did make some jokes, I by no means want to belittle or understate the gravity of addiction. With gambling becoming more easily accessible than it's ever been, it's led to a rise in gambling addictions across the country, especially in young adults. So I'm going to be leaving multiple free resources down in the description where even if you feel like you just need to reach out to somebody, I would highly encourage you do. Sorry to leave the video on a bit of a heavier note, but it wouldn't have felt right without saying anything. And with that being said, thank you all for watching.